I know we're at the end of a very long 2 days, but we wanted to just talk a little bit about media relations. I know a lot of you are dealing with reporters who are curious about your business, curious about the industry, writing and often filming, and people are interested in knowing kind of how best to deal with that. So we wanted to talk about first a little bit about why media relations is an important thing, and then we'll get into, we can do Q&A, or if you guys have issues that you've dealt with that you want to raise, we can, we're happy to kind of workshop those. First, I guess actually I should step back for a second. For those of you who weren't in the earlier session or haven't met me, I'm Taylor West. I'm the Deputy Director at NCIA. I handle communications and media relations, among other things, for the organization. So that's my qualifications. My background is in political communications. I worked with campaigns and some other clients in that experience. And with me is Mason Tvert. You have probably seen Mason in the media of your choice at some point or another. Mason is with the Marijuana Policy Project and has been one of the most visible faces throughout the process of working to legalize marijuana on various levels. Has dealt with some incredibly interesting and entertaining media opportunities. I don't know if you want to say anything more about your background.
No, I think that's
fair enough.
I'm in communications. No, thanks. Yeah, it's great to be able to be here. I think that there's a lot that can be done in this industry surrounding the media. So I'm really glad to be able to have an outlet to share my opinion on that.
So to just start out, I want to talk a little bit about why it's important to think about media relations. Aside from the obvious that, you don't want to show up in the paper or on TV in an unflattering story. But beyond that, it's important to recognize that media is a way that many people are learning about our industry for the first time, especially in states that don't have a legal program or just getting a medical program started. There's still a lot of misconceptions around what it means to have legal marijuana in a state. And so mass media is a way that people are learning about that. And everybody has their opinion one way or another about how they feel about journalism and media these days, but the reality is it is still a place where lots of people are learning about our industry. So it's important that we not write it off. And especially given that those of us who are here at this conference are part of a growing, very professional and accountable sector of the industry, we want to make sure that we're getting our story told so that people are seeing that as a reflection of the industry. And that means that it's important to not immediately assume that reporters are an enemy. That doesn't mean that you don't practice some caution and make sure that you're thinking through what you're saying and that you're saying the things that you want to say and not getting off on a different track. But it's important not to go straight into that relationship in an antagonistic way, especially these days. I think we can all see that there are places in the media that are genuinely interested and curious about what we're doing in the legal industry and genuinely interested in portraying that in as accurate a way as they know. We still get the B-roll, the side shots of things that don't exactly match up with what we'd prefer to see, but we're getting lots and lots of stories out there about the new way that the industry is operating, and that's really important for us. Do you want to say anything more about that?
Well, really quickly, rule number one is know who your audience is. Is anyone here with a media outlet?
I see one. Ryan Rice with the Huffington Post, who just put him out back there.
You emailed many times, yet never met face-to-face.
Oh, you never met Ryan. Excellent.
Okay, well, I have to hold back a little bit.
I was going to say, that's actually a very good rule to start out with. Know who's listening.
Yeah, no, I think, obviously I'm biased, I'm a communications person by trade, but I think that the media is perhaps one of the most important elements of this entire situation in which we are right now. In that, to put it in perspective, on January 1st and throughout the whole month or the month leading up to January 1st, every reporter out there had the same question. What's your biggest concern? What could go wrong? What's the biggest concern? And I would say, very politely, you. I'm worried about what you're going to say is happening and whether it actually reflects reality. Because I am quite confident that what we are doing here, this industry, is going to work, and that, obviously it's new and it's going to take some time to perfect, if that's even possible. But the notion that that like we're going to have, like with like alcohol, for example, you'd have to, if you're a PR person with alcohol, you have to worry about the fact that you're going to have like hundreds of thousands of people dying from consuming your product. Well, with marijuana, I need to worry about whether people think there are people dying from using marijuana, not necessarily, So I think it's incredibly important that we are building and maintaining relationships with members of the media, making sure that they're aware of what's going on and making sure they know that they have a responsibility right now to portray this in a accurate light and not a sensationalistic light. So, it was funny because how Taylor came at this, she said, you might have a knee-jerk aggressive reaction to them, whereas I have a knee-jerk friendly, open reaction to them. And they have to actually earn my, being pissed off at them. But that's when I got into finally doing this for a living, to working on this issue and working with the media, the concept of media relations clicked for me and made sense. I now have relationships with members of the media. I mean, I feel like Ryan back there and I might go way back. I've read his stuff. I feel like I can go talk to him like I've met him before, yet I've never seen him. But and I ran into other reporters around here. And when they know you, then they trust the information that I'm giving them. And I do my best to trust that they're going to report it well and accurately. And the thing is that when they don't, I know that I can contact them and let them know that. So building those relationships is really, really important.
Yeah, and that gets at another important point, that sort of concept of trust. I mean, it's important to always realize that this is still a professional relationship. You may develop friendships as well, but you are always going to be dealing with the possibility that they're going to be reporting a bad story or anything along those lines. But the first piece of developing a good media relationship is a certain level of trust. And that means, first and foremost, don't lie to reporters. I mean, that sounds simple, but it's important. Now, that doesn't mean that you go out and air all of your dirty laundry, but it does mean don't actively put something out there that you know isn't true. It's not, in the end, going to do you a lot of good. It's going to damage your relationship, and it's going to make you not someone that reporters are willing to come to again unless they're likely to be writing something unflattering about you. It is also a good thing if you have the opportunity to try to be helpful, especially, again, right now. There are a lot of reporters out there who are genuinely trying to understand the industry right now. And if you can be helpful in showing them what kind of interesting new things you're doing with your business, then A, that's good PR for you. B, it's great PR for the industry. And C, it does develop, again, a level of trust and an understanding that they can come to you and get something good for what they're looking for. All of these things kind of build up over time, and not all of you may be interacting with reporters on a daily or weekly basis. But when you have the opportunities to, the initial position is best if it's a positive one, if you start out that way at least. And then I think it's fair if you feel like you've been treated unfairly, and you raise that concern and you don't feel like your concerns were taken seriously, it's fair not to talk to that reporter again. There is no reason that you have to, but it's helpful overall to start out from a position of thinking of them as someone that you can work with.
I'm more forgiving. Always, you can always come back to me even if you've wronged me. But yeah, in terms of just on the specifics, like Taylor said, don't lie. There's a lot of ways that you can lie. So I guess, this is just kind of stuff that I like to tell people when I go over things, media training for activists that we work with and folks who are talking to the media. It's not just a matter of necessarily lying. Lying might be like just making something up. But there's also exaggeration, like we're generating enough money in tax revenue to save the schools in Colorado. No, we're not. We are certainly going to help schools in Colorado, and it's certainly money that was not going to be there otherwise, and that's a perfectly good point, and we can convey how important the tax revenue is without exaggerating. And then they go to the state, and the state says, no, this is just a drop in the bucket, and then we look stupid. So exaggeration, bad. Obviously, lying flat out, making things up, guessing at statistics, certain things like that. If you don't know an actual specific number, don't say a specific number. Or at least say a number and say, I think it's something like that, but you should check. I say that all the time. I say, yeah, I think it's something like this. But then as long as you make that clear, and most importantly, what reporters typically like is to say, I'll follow up and I'll send you the actual numbers that I couldn't quite remember right now. But generally what I find is that, we need to be reliable sources of information. And I would be upset if a reporter wrote something that was an exaggeration, so I would not want to exaggerate to them. So I would definitely just say, one of the strengths, one of the things that we've got going for us, I keep in mind, I'm talking more from the advocacy perspective than the industry perspective. The best thing that we've got going for us is that we're right. Like this is an argument, and we're right, and so it's really ours to lose and to screw up.
It's hard to explain how powerful that is, seriously. Having worked in political campaigns where there's very rarely a situation where it's absolutely black and white, like one side has it down cold. Here, it's so much easier. We really do have a better argument.
We don't have to exaggerate, we don't have to lie, but our opponents do. And so by always being honest and always, providing accurate information and not embellishing and so on, it really helps. I think it's played a major role, quite frankly, to toot my own horn, in Colorado from where we've come. When we started, we weren't taken very seriously. Back in 2005, I moved out here and we ran the first initiatives in Denver and Colorado. The media didn't really know what to expect from someone who is running a marijuana legalization effort, but we developed those relationships, and over time, they came to recognize that we were always being very honest and very forthright, and I would always make it very clear to say, I want to be sure that you understand we're not saying blah, 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 we're just saying, it's always, they recognized that we were being genuine and that we were being honest, and then they would hear from our opponents. And they can, members of the media are not stupid all the time. And so they
especially not Ryan Riley from the Huffington Post.
No one
very
from the
smart.
Huffington Post.
Very, very smart.
Yeah, the illustrious Huffington Post publication. No, but they can sense when someone's full of shit. And so when they can tell that you're being honest, and then they hear from opponents, they hear these like crazy things and it just doesn't add up, that is hugely beneficial. So try to maintain that. Remember that you're doing what's right. Don't blow it.
So let's talk just a little bit about some basic messages that we as an industry want to be communicating. And then once we go through that, then we can kind of open it up and either take questions or, like I said, kind of workshop some issues if you've been dealing with specific problems. So a couple of the sort of message points that I think would be relevant for you as business folks, if you're dealing with reporters. We want to, as I said earlier, continue to put forward the image of a professional industry. And we are a professional industry, and we want to make sure that those of us who are committed to that are getting our stories told in the media. So when you have the opportunity to host a reporter or a camera at perhaps your business, first of all, make sure that things look the way they should. Make sure that you're dressed the way you would want to be seen, and that your employees are as well. That you're obeying all of the laws that are possible to be obeyed in this industry, so that we aren't opening up vulnerabilities to get dinged on. And I'll mention one just because it's it's a funny example. It was corrected very quickly, but on January 1st, when adult use sales opened up in Colorado, one of the dispensaries, and I genuinely actually do not remember which one it was, but I wouldn't say if I did, ended up in camera footage on local television in Denver with employees rolling joints for pre-rolled joints for sale. And they were rolling them and then licking the paper and sealing it off and putting them in the bags. That's not okay. You can't be selling rolls that have been licked by your employees. And to the credit of the folks who were covering it, they did do a news story about it. I mean, I can't really blame them. That's sort of irresistible from a television news standpoint. They didn't blow it way out of proportion. The business, as soon as they were sort of notified, realized that, pre-rolled joints in that magnitude, that capacity, that many of them they hadn't really been selling before. So it was a new process, and that was where there was a slip up. But, it's a good example of a thing that shouldn't have been on camera, shouldn't have been done at all, but definitely shouldn't have been on camera. And it's those little things that it's important to kind of keep in mind when you're in that situation. But from a message perspective, we want to talk about the fact that we are businesses like any other, that we should be treated fairly like other businesses, especially when it comes to the issues that we're really fighting on, things like the banking access issue and excess taxation issue. People understand when you talk to them about small businesses, and all of you are small businesses, and you shouldn't be, afraid to really portray yourselves that way. It's just because the business you happen to be in is one that's new and that people have some strange preconceptions about, doesn't make you any less of a legitimate business. So that's a piece that we like to emphasize. If you were in here during the marketing portion, general session, you heard me talking a good bit about medical cannabis because obviously that's where a lot of our businesses are operating. And it's important if you're in the medical cannabis business to remember that you're in the medical cannabis business, that you are serving patients. And talking about that is important. It's important because it's what you do, but it's also important because it is it's such a powerful way to fight the stereotype about what cannabis is. People now overwhelmingly support access to medical cannabis, and a big part of that is because we've shown that it is a genuine medical product. So you want to talk about care and about the things that your staff are trained to do to help people find the kinds of products that work best for them. Those are the kinds of things that we want to focus on. Look, it's great to talk about the fact that you're a money-making business. We love that this is good for the economy. There's a difference between talking about how you're a successful business that's contributing to the economy versus talking about how you're in it to make a bunch of cash. All of us want to be successful businesses, and there's nothing wrong with that. But people going out and talking about how the reason they got in it is because they saw the opportunity to rake in the bucks, it's not the story that's what most of this industry is about, and that's why we don't. That's not the thing that we'd prefer to focus on. So think about that when you're talking about your success as a business. Think about how that comes across when it is sort of carved out of a larger conversation, and try to keep that in mind. Any other things you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, think about other industries, other businesses. Like, you don't really think of, CEOs at major companies being in the news saying, like, we are going to be grossing this many millions of dollars, and then we're going to sell out to these other people because this is like a new industry and we're getting in ground floor. They say, like, that we are creating a product that there is a demand for, and we're meeting the needs of consumers and giving back to the community and so on. Because those, while they're both true, it's just when you're in the media, you are trying to project an image that is going to be positive for your business and for your industry. And one thing, I'll take this opportunity to say, also keep in mind that there are a lot of places watching your areas where your businesses might be operating, and they haven't passed these kinds of laws yet. So, right now we've got a campaign going on in Alaska to pass an initiative similar to Colorado's, and we see news stories being shown by our opponents where they've got business people saying, we're just in this to, we're going to bring in all this money, or they, their appearance is not very professional, or they've engaged in some sort of unprofessional business practice, what have you. That stuff then gets used as an example of how bad it's going to be in these other places. And again, it's not even that it's bad here, it's just that they're going to make it appear bad. So, just keep in mind that, you're setting an example that's going to make its way around the country and around the world. And because of how new all of this is, you're also potentially going to be setting an example that will be persisting for years to come, because they are getting video footage and interviews and all these things that they will then use again in the future. You might see, it's not like they've gone in and shot footage of people exchanging marijuana for money or in a grow room thousands and thousands and thousands of times. They went in, then they got that footage, and then they reuse it. And so if you are the business that has them come in and get the shitty footage, and then they're going to reuse that shitty footage in every news story about this issue for the next 6 months, that's no good. So keep in mind that, it's not necessarily man, that was a bad news story tonight. It might lend to bad stories in the future too.
Okay, let's open it up a little bit to you guys. If, as I said, either we can, if you have a question, feel free to ask it, or if you have a scenario that you've dealt with that you're maybe not sure how the best way to answer it would have been, and Mason and I can use our superpowers to somehow solve that for you. But we can talk about ways that you might handle that sort of issue. And I'll try to repeat the questions in case it's difficult for you to hear, and also for the benefit of the camera. You, sir.
So this is less of an advocacy question, more of how enterprises can raise their profiles, their customer base.
Yep, that's a good question.
Do you have advice about how we can create newsworthy stories and deliver them to the media in the best format?
That's a great question. So again, sort of for the benefit of the cameras here, the gist of the question is, how can a business proactively create the opportunity for some good media coverage? And it's a great question. There are a number of ways that you can do that. It's actually one of the things that's great to do is to pay attention to the kinds of stories that get covered in your local media, whether it's television, newspaper, online, and try to see what the common core is between them. Generally, it's some kind of personal story, especially if what you're looking for is something that's not tied to a direct news hook. So if it's not, one way to get news is to have a new product or to open a new store, some specific piece of news. But if you're not in that situation, you might have a customer that's been coming to you for a couple of years now, and then, I'm making this up off the top of my head, so I have no idea where I'm going with it. But if they have an amazing story about how, cannabis has changed their life, work with them to, potentially tell that story. Now, obviously, not everybody's going to be comfortable with their personal story in the news, but look for those types of opportunities where there's human interest involved, and you, as someone who has a business that's helping them, are a big part of that story. I will tell you, and you've probably already seen this, there is right now an insatiable appetite for stories related to this industry. Everyone wants them because it's a hot topic, and everyone wants them because readers and viewers are very interested in it. So it's actually quite good for ratings. The more of those we can make into positive stories, the better. Don't be afraid to reach out to reporters locally, especially the TV guys. I mean, they can be tough to track down, but they are always looking for interesting stuff. And if they have a good visual component, something that they can put on TV that looks interesting, then they're going to be interested in following up on that. These days, press releases, they're kind of a necessary evil, but they're not nearly as effective as they used to be. People get so inundated by them. you almost still have to do them just because, but I wouldn't count on that being by itself enough. Your better bet is to look at which reporters are doing the kinds of stories you'd like to have done and reach out to them. Say, I saw your story about John, the veteran who's dealing with PTSD. It was a great story. I actually have a veteran working in my store who initially got into this because it was such an important way for him to work on his reentry. Again, I'm completely making this up. But the point is, if you can find hooks to previous stories, that's also a good way to make sure you're tapping the right people in media. Mason, I'll let you add to that.
I got lots of good ideas.
Mason is the king of media opportunities, by the way.
They could be any of yours. No, but some that I've seen, some people. Denver Relief is a dispensary retail store now. But I think one of things that they've done that's gotten them a lot of good positive attention, they did things like food drives, and they created a team of people to go out on 420 and clean the park after the big event out there. So those types of like do-gooder, giving back to the community stories, that type of thing always could potentially be a good way to go. And of course, it's also it's not just getting your own business's name out there, but it's also demonstrates that this is an industry and your business is giving back and so on. So things that you should not do, name strains after famous people. Sanjay Gupta, whoever did that is an idiot because it, completely took, number one, Sanjay Gupta came out and said, medical marijuana has many benefits. It should be legal, blah, blah, blah. Amazing. It was a massive impact. And then some people decided to name a strain of marijuana after the guy. Well, number one, that just looks stupid. Number two, how many other prominent people want to come out now and voice their support for this and then think like, oh, I don't want there to be like a, Hill Dog strain of weed when Hillary Clinton gives a shout out from the stage, So just keep in mind that there might, you might get attention, but is it the attention you want? Both in terms of for your business and for this industry and this issue and so on, it may not necessarily be. I definitely think that's a great route to go right now, given where this industry is to show that there are other aspects to these businesses other than just, making money and so on, but, also giving back, doing these types of programs and whatnot. Right now, there is such an interest in the media that you probably do have the ability to get a lot of attention just based on new products or things, as Taylor said. You can certainly make sure people are aware of your business. Reach out to the reporters ever. If you see someone has written a story saying, oh, there's, they're writing a story about edible products, what have you, and you have some sort of edible products, that you should contact them and say, hey, just want to make sure that you're aware of this trend or these, new what have you, so that the next time you cover this, you might find it of interest. When it comes to press releases, I live and die by press releases. I love press releases. I think that they are...
You're living in a dying world,
they
sir.
Are art and I don't care if I sound like a jerk, but I am a Picasso of press releases. I love them. I think they're a great way to get a message out there. Now, the thing is that they have to be well done. If you just have, if it looks like crap or it doesn't read well, then it's going to probably be discarded and you're in trouble. But if you are writing good releases and only writing them about good stuff, then they can be very effective. And by that I mean, what I had been taught was, you don't go to the well too many times. If you are putting out a press release about every new product you ever get, then every time someone receives your press release, they're just going to, this guy sends me press releases all the time. But if they only get something once in a while, and it's always something that's pretty noteworthy, then it's a good idea. So you don't want to blow those opportunities. You don't want to just constantly send stuff out or constantly pitch reporters on things. Make sure they're actually good and put some thought into them, plan them out, have a good angle to it. So if you are going to clean up the park one day, or you are going to sponsor a team, sponsor runners at the, MS walk or something like that, and that's another opportunity, like sponsorships, that type of thing. I've seen some marijuana businesses sponsor these types of events, the Walk for the Cure and Race for the Cure. Plan it out. Like, let them know that it's coming up, let them know of a good opportunity, like, oh, we're gonna have all of our runners getting together at one spot at one time, and, don't just, 1 week before the event, just, send a release out saying, we're sponsoring runners. Like, that's not really gonna get you very far. Make sure that they know where they can find these runners, when they can find these runners. Are there any particularly noteworthy runners? Like maybe there's a person who has MS and they're a patient that is a member of this particular dispensary, and so all the patients are going to get together and join this guy to walk, I don't want to say ham it up, but you're looking for as many hooks as possible on this.
Make it easy for them.
And do you disseminate these through something like PR Newswire, or do you take them right?
That's for the weak. No, it's for people with more money than I have. That's certainly an option if you can afford it. But you can build a media list. You can generally, just by going to news websites and looking at their, staff room, email lists. I honestly, I stock. I will okay, let's see. So I've met another reporter at the New York Times, and their email address was first initial, last name. Okay, let's just Google their, okay, that didn't work, nothing came up. Oh, wait a minute, maybe it's only the first 4 letters of their last name. Let's Google that. Oh, there it is, and figure it out. There are also some paid services that have media lists and stuff available. One of the definite easiest ones is when a lot of times at the bottom of stories, it'll say the email address of the reporter, and a lot of times their phone number. So obviously, if you've just read a story by someone who is of interest, look at the bottom to see if they happen to have their information available there.
My take on those, and then I know we're running short, so I'll move on to the next question after this. My take on the sort of services that are out there, I think for things like PR Newswire, there are certain benefits to it. It does, a lot of times when you use them, it will end up making you appear in Google News searches, which, depending on whether that's important to you or not, can be a good thing. That being said, they are expensive, and frankly, if your story is not a big national business news story, it's not clear if they're really worth it. A lot of reporters get pretty turned off by the large database send-out releases because they don't do a very good job of targeting which reporters actually cover which beats. And so after a while, people get very frustrated if they're receiving a bunch of pitches about subjects that they never cover. You're going to have a lot more impact if you have the time and the resources to research and build out a little bit of a relationship with some of your key people, especially if what you're doing is mostly in a local market. Then it's important to try to actually build a direct relationship there so that when you send a release, they know who you are and they're likely to read it. That's hard. It takes a lot of time, and not everybody has that time. But to the extent that you can do it, it is probably the more effective way to go about it. Okay, I think, Sean, you had your hand up more about.
I have a question. When you're starting a relationship, you hopefully trust a new reporter, and a lot of the time, as they're learning about the industry, you run into the same 4-story concept they want to write about. They want to write about string names, the stupidity of some string names. There's 4 things. Basically, they're looking for keys underneath the street lamp because that's where you look, even though the keys are actually interesting stories way over there
Sure.
that they don't know about yet that I would like to pitch to them. In the meantime, they want quotes on the same dumb story concepts that everybody wants to write about.
Right.
How much can you push back and say, let's please not talk about green crack yet again, but let's talk about, I don't know, state regulatory reform. Because that's a real story.
Right. Right.
You want to sell newspapers, you talk about regulatory.
Yeah. Well, I'll jump and then I'll let Mason jump in as well. I don't have like a great one-size-fits-all answer to that question, but I totally recognize what you're getting at. And I think the only real suggestion that I can make is, I think you want to start out with a positive relationship. You don't want to immediately tell them their story idea is stupid. If there's a way for you to lean into their story a little, give them something about, actually there's a lot of innovation in marketing right now. And yeah, there's lots of diversity in strain names, but we're also seeing, increased diversity in all kinds of ways that things are being marketed. And let me show you actually, like, this is not maybe as like funny, but this is a really ingenious way to, portray this product. If you can somehow nudge them without having to push them all the way to a completely different story, then hopefully they get that you are a serious person who has been helpful to them on this, but is also capable of talking about things in a much more substantive way. Whether that works or not, but it's what I would try to do if, in that situation. I don't know, Mason.
Well, I think this is definitely where you get to that question of your relationship with them, because, her response is, well, you don't want to tell them their story idea sucks. Well, if I know them really well, I'm going to be like, dude, that sucks. Like, seriously?
Yeah.
I remember a reporter at the Huffington Post. It was not Ryan. It was a different one. With whom I have a cordial relationship. Called me, on January 5th. And I was like, we're doing a story on how there's still a black market for marijuana. I was like,
Right.
Are you serious?
It's been
5
days.
How much investigation did you have to do to figure that one out? Like you're really writing a story about how there's still an underground market for marijuana 5 days after this. And he was just like, yeah, you make a good point. And at least got him to incorporate that. But if it was some, hi, this is someone from, the New York Times, we're doing a big thing on this, I've never met you before, I wouldn't be like, dude, no. I'd probably just say, well, I really hope you'll also talk about blah, blah, blah. And it just depends. A lot of times, the reporters already have the story written. They're just looking for people to fill in the blanks, you know? There was this woman doing a big story on packaging and whether kids can tell edible products, versus standard candy or whatever. And I was like, well, this is kind of really, something that's already been done. And she's, oh, well, look at these products, kids. I was like, well, have you are you also going to put a glass of wine next to a glass of grape juice? Are you also going to look at other? And she's like, oh, that's interesting. And she incorporated, so she it was mostly a stupid story about, edibles and stuff. But there was one point where she's like, and, some say that this is, similar to how one might treat a glass of wine or something. So you might be able to at least affect it in some way. So at least register your concern with the story. I've had nonstop, documentary, reality TV or just long format, MSNBC specials, stuff like that. Well, we want to do something on the marijuana industry. I guess I shouldn't say this. They're like, we want to do something about the marijuana industry. And I was like, okay, been done. Why don't you do something cool about the advocacy community? Sorry, guys.
Hey!
I do, yeah, that's another thing. On a couple occasions, they've been like, oh, that's interesting, and maybe we should include that.
I do find it helps too if you think about things that you think are really interesting, remember those, jot them down, do whatever it is, so that when you're caught in a moment with a reporter and they're asking you, well, what do you think I ought to be looking at? What am I not getting? That you have a couple of ideas right in mind. Because they really are looking for interesting ideas. I'm fascinated right now by the science that's happening in the industry, both on the analytical side and on all the extraction technology and all of that. I think it's a really cool story that also shows how the industry is evolving. And that's like one of my top of mind pitches now when I talk to reporters and they're saying, well, I've done this story, but what else is out there that I might look into? And I know that is a story that would reflect well on the industry as well. And it's good if you can, it makes you helpful, it makes you someone they're likely to call again, and it can help sometimes move them off of a topic that's less interesting. Other questions or things we want to bring up? Yep.
Well, first of all, thank you for holding a best practices session like this. I think it's very important for the industry to have this kind of feedback. And I'm a colleague in the profession. One thing I would comment on is I think it's really important to know your trade media business. So, for example, there are companies who are selling technologies to banks. And know the banking trades that you can get stories out
Yeah.
to. There are companies that are selling apparel. There are apparel buyers who want to read trade publications. So those read media which really reach actually dealt with situations like that. So that's those kind of people are meant to be able to reach when you're trying to make business.
Yeah, that's a great point. And again, just for the cameras, the gist of this is there are trade publications in just about every industry you can imagine, not just the cannabis industry, but the ancillary industries that we're working with, banking, financial services, equipment manufacturers, all of these things. And even they are not immune to the interest in the cannabis industry. Joe Hodes, who's the marketing VP at Dixie, gave a presentation where he talked about the just add weed phenomenon, where pretty much anything becomes interesting if you add weed to it for media. And he's right. I mean, anything. And so when you are doing something interesting, but it also has cannabis, related to it, then it becomes a much more attractive thing for media. And you're right, the trade publications, especially if you're a business-to-business, business, those trade publications are a great place to seed some information about your work. Other questions? Yep.
Another one, do you have any recommendations about selecting a partner to help you create stories? Or is that something that you have to do in-house yourself? By partner, I mean, I guess it would be a PR agency or a PR individual?
Yeah, I mean, you would either hire someone or contract someone. I don't know. There's got to be people that do what I do for money. I'm not one of them.
And not just for love.
Yeah, not just passion. No, but yeah, there's certainly, there are firms or there are, individual, contractors out there that do this kind of stuff.
And can you, like generally, can you just trust them to generate stories? Do you have to generate yourself? It's kind of polished.
I think it depends. I mean, obviously, like if you hire someone who's done work in this field, in this industry, on this issue, or even like, if you own, if you're like, have like a food product, someone who's like helped market food products before, you might, find someone that is able to come up with those types of ideas versus just finding a random person who's never, like they might not even necessarily know what it is that you do, so it might be a little, but I mean, that's what advertising agencies or, PR firms, they will learn about it and they'll do it. And basically they'll pitch you ideas of things and you can, probably in most cases tell them you don't like them. That's generally how it works.
Yeah.
But then they might come up with something that you do like, or you could say, we already have this in mind and we're trying to execute this and we need someone to do it.
It is a tough thing to evaluate because it's not a science. You can have a great pitch and you can have a PR company that's working very hard on your behalf and doing all the things they're supposed to do, and it just may not take off. And it's hard to know every time whether it was their fault or just, the opportunity wasn't there. You got beat out by the World Cup or something like that. That being said, if I were, bringing in someone from outside to try to work on my PR as a cannabis business, or as any business, frankly, I would want them to spend some time almost interviewing me or whoever is most involved with my company to try to get at where the story opportunities are, to try to understand, what are the most compelling things about your business. If they come in and they're basically just saying, yeah, they can draft the press releases and send them out, well, that's not valueless. They probably do have some, contacts with reporters that they've worked with before in various sections of newspapers, or a business reporter at the local television station, something like that. But recognize that in the current environment, most reporters are so deluged with pitches that making it stand out is a matter of shoe leather as much as it is any kind of technical expertise. We're in a kind of interesting place for this kind of thing with the industry, because right now companies are just starting to get to a point where they're really ready to spend real money on marketing, and there are only some people who have real experience doing that kind of thing. So I would look for somebody who either has experience specifically in the type of product you're doing, like Mason said, food or technology, or look for somebody who is ready to invest in getting to know your business in a way that allows them to build some real stories.
Yeah, another part of this is that, it's kind of like with lobbyists. I mean, who are the best lobbyists? Former elected officials, because they know all the other elected officials. So who oftentimes are the best media relations people? Former members of the media. Look at every press secretary for, major campaigns, or for, candidates for elected officials. Oftentimes they used to be reporters, or they used to be editors, or what have you. But also, you might just be paying someone for their relationships. Like with a lobbyist, you hire a lobbyist because they can get you meetings with certain people. Well, you might want to find someone that has relationships with a bunch of reporters because they can help get your story to a bunch of reporters.
And I'll tell you, in the same way that I said, keep an eye on sort of how stories are being reported in your media. Look for companies, if you see companies that are popping up in the media multiple times in ways that you think are really impressive, reach out and find out if they're working with someone. I mean, that is as good a way to evaluate, a PR or communications firm's work as anything, is to see, how other companies are succeeding in that area. You may find that they have in-house people, in which case you won't be able to, unless you want to poach them away. but it's worth it, and that's one of these, at these kinds of events, you're going to get pitched by people who do this kind of work. But it's also probably just as valuable to talk to companies that are using those firms and say, what do you like about this firm that you're working with? See if they're available to work for you too, if you think they're doing good work, or if that's not an option, at least try to get a sense of what do you think, what do these other companies think is the most valuable thing they're getting from their person, and that gives you some perspective to work with. We are officially over time. I can stick around a little longer if other people have questions, but if not, we can wrap it up. All right, thanks, and thank you for coming overall. We are done.